The broadcast of the regular meeting of the Planning Commission will now begin.
All right. Thank you, everybody. I will open the July 6, 2020 City of Minneapolis Planning Commission hearing. My name is Sam Rockwell, and I will ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Caprini. Dunick. Smiley. Here. Lipke here. Marwa. Here. Meyer.
Here.
Olson. Here. Rockwell.
Here.
Schrader.
Here.
And Sweezy.
Here.
There are 7 commissioners present.
Very good. We have quorum, and the meeting may proceed. I would accept a motion from one of my commissioners to accept the minutes of the June 15th, 2020 City Planning Commission hearing. Commissioner Olson.
So moved.
Do we have a second? Commissioner Smiley.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Clerk, please call the roll.
Smiley.
Aye.
Marwa.
Aye.
Meyer.
Aye.
Olson.
Aye.
Rockwell or Schrader.
Aye.
Sweezy.
Aye.
6-0.
That motion carries. Our next item of business is to organize the agenda for this hearing. For those of you on the line, we'll walk through the entire agenda item by item. And if you wish to testify against staff recommendation, then please let your presence known, and we'll discuss that item and hear that testimony. Otherwise, we may place that item on the consent agenda and not discuss it. You can unmute yourself by pressing *6. For those also on the line, the agenda is available at lims.minneapolismn.gov, so you can follow along there. The first item is item number 5, Sabathani Community Center at 310 East 38th Street and Ward 8. Is anybody wishing to speak against staff recommendation on item number 5? *6 unmutes. Hearing nobody, we will place item number 5 on consent. Item number 6 is Nick 42 for 4220 to 4230 Nicollet Avenue in Ward 8. Is anybody wishing to testify against staff recommendation on item number 6? Hearing no one, place item number 6 on the consent agenda. Item number 7 is Nick Stoddard at 2810 Fremont Avenue South in Ward 10. Anyone wishing to testify against staff recommendation on item number 7? *6 unmutes. Place item number 7 on the consent agenda. Item number 8 is Bobby and Steve's Auto World Smoke Shop, 5801, 5815, 5821, and 5827 in Nicollet Avenue, and 9 and 15 58th Street East in Ward 11.
Which normally would be.
Does anybody wish? I would please mute your line if you're on the line.
All these guys would be on the dais.
Is anybody wishing to testify on item number 8?
My project, we get up and testify, et cetera, et cetera. But the
All right, we'll place item number 8 on the consent agenda. Item number 9 is the Snelling Yards redevelopment at 3601 44th Street East in Ward 12. Is anybody wishing to testify on item number 9 against staff recommendation? place item number 9 on consent. Item number 10 is 1200 Central Avenue Northeast in Ward 1. Is anybody wishing to testify against staff recommendations in item number 10? Star 6 unmutes. Hearing no one, we'll place item number 10 on the consent agenda. We will discuss item number 11, which is 336 2nd Street Northeast in Ward 3. Item number 12 is North Star at 625 Marquette Avenue, 608, 618, and 618 and a half 2nd Avenue South in Ward 7. Is anybody wishing to testify against staff recommendation for item number 12? We'll place item number 12 on the consent agenda. We will discuss item number 13, which is 400 2nd Street Northeast in Ward 3. Item number 14 is 2316 4th Avenue South in Ward 10. Is anybody wishing to testify against staff recommendation on item number 14? You unmute yourself by hitting star 6. Somebody is unmuted, and we're getting the delay of my voice coming through your phone, so please mute yourself if you're on the line. Star 6 mutes yourself. All right, item number 14 will be placed on the consent agenda. Item number 15 is Mandela Montessori Preschool at 1620 46th Street East in Ward 11. Anybody wishing to testify against staff recommendation on item number 15? Hearing none, we'll place item number 15 on the consent agenda. Item number 16 is South Lindale Liquors at 5504, 5516, and 5536 Lindale Avenue South in Ward 13. Is anybody wishing to testify against staff recommendation for item number 16? Hearing done, we'll place item number 16 on the consent agenda, and item number 17 is 35 Groveland Terrace in Ward 7, and we will discuss item number 17. So our agenda as amended is items number 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 14, 15, and 16 on the consent agenda. I'm sorry, somebody.
Hello. Point of order. I am here to discuss item number 10, 1200 Central Avenue Northeast, Ward 1. My name is Craig Andreessen.
Item number 10. You are wishing to testify against staff's recommendation?
That is correct.
All right, we will pull item number 10 from that consent then. Thank you. Last call for anybody else on the line. We are planning to discuss items number 10, 11, 13, and 17. If you wish to discuss anything other than those, please unmute yourself. Let us know what you wish to testify to. All right, so our agenda as amended is on the consent agenda are items number 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 12, 14, 15, and 16. On the discussion agenda are items number 10, 11, 13, and 17. Commissioners, do I have a motion to approve the agenda as amended? Commissioner Smiley.
I move to approve the agenda as amended.
Okay, second. Commissioner Olson.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the agenda as amended. Clerk, please call the roll.
Smiley.
Aye.
Marwa.
Aye.
Meyer.
Aye.
Olson.
Aye.
Schrader.
Aye.
Sweezy.
Aye.
6-0.
That motion carries. I will now open the public hearing on the consent agenda. If anybody wishes to testify on the items on the consent agenda, please press star 6. Hearing no one, I will close the public hearing on the consent agenda. Commissioners, do I have a motion to approve items on the consent agenda consistent with staff recommendations? Commissioner Smiley.
I move to approve the consent agenda according to the staff recommendations on those items.
Commissioner Olson.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Clerk, please call the roll.
Smiley.
Aye.
Marwa.
Aye.
Meyer.
Aye.
Olson.
Aye.
Schrader.
Aye.
Sweezy.
Aye.
6-0.
That motion carries. The consent agenda is approved. We'll move on to our discussion agenda. First item up is item number 10, 1200 Central Avenue Northeast in Ward 1, City Staff. It's Andrew Friends. Andrew, over to you.
Good afternoon, President Rockwell and Commissioners. IT, do you have the slides up? Are you able to pull those up, please? Thank you. So before you today are 3 applications for a new mixed-use development at 1200 Central Avenue Northeast. The applicant is seeking a conditional use permit to allow 111 dwelling units in the Industrial Living Overlay District, a conditional use permit to increase maximum height in the I-1 district from 4 stories or 56 feet to 6 stories and 60.6 feet, and site plan review. Next slide, please. The property is located at the northwest corner of Central Avenue Northeast and 12th Avenue Northeast. It's currently occupied by 2 commercial buildings, which were originally associated with a lumber yard that historically existed in the area. The property is bordered to the west by a railroad right-of-way and to the north by a truck parts distributor, which shares an access easement and curb cut on Central Avenue with the subject property. Next slide, please. The applicant is proposing to construct a new 6-story mixed-use building on the site. The building would contain 111 dwelling units, approximately 3,600 square feet of industrial space, and approximately 1,700 square feet of commercial space. If we could go 2 slides forward. The building would contain 1 level of below-grade parking, as well as some adjacent covered but not fully enclosed parking on the basement level. Go 1 more slide, please. The main level would include additional enclosed parking, as well as the industrial space, the commercial space, and the residential lobby. Pedestrian access to the residential and commercial uses would be from Central, while access to the industrial use would be from 12th. Next slide, please. The upper 5 floors would contain the dwelling units and the residential amenity space on the top floor. Could we go 2 slides forward, please? The exterior materials would be primarily brick on the first floor and primarily metal panel on the upper floors, although some fiber cement would be included as well. If we go to the last slide, please. 3 sets of public comments were received regarding the applications, the first of which was included with the staff report when it was published with the agenda, and the other 2 you should have received today. Staff has found that both conditional use permit applications meet the required findings and is recommending approval of those. Regarding site plan review, there are 2 needed alternative compliance requests. If we could go back 1 slide, please. The first alternative compliance request is for a blank wall on the north elevation, as shown here. This blank wall is adjacent to covered but unenclosed parking on the exterior and enclosed parking at the interior. Beyond the covered parking to the north is a large drive aisle and maneuvering space between this property and the truck parts distributor to the north, which is regularly utilized for freight truck maneuvering. This blank wall is also inset from the exterior wall of the floors above and has very limited visibility from the street. Given these conditions, staff is recommending approval of this alternative compliance request. If we could please go back to slide 4, be 5 slides back. Alternative compliance is also required for general landscaping and screening. The project as proposed exceeds the required tree and shrub counts, but is short of the required landscaped area by approximately 160 square feet. Given that the applicant is exceeding the tree and shrub requirements, and that this project has somewhat unique access and maneuvering needs in that it includes an industrial loading dock on a mixed-use building of this scale, staff is recommending approval of this alternative compliance request as well. Staff is recommending approval of all 3 applications subject to the conditions listed in the staff report, and I'm happy to address any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for staff at this time? Seeing none, I'll ask the applicant to unmute yourself, *6, introduce yourself, and add any further details if you wish.
Hi, good evening, Commission. My name is Pete Keeley with Collage Architects, working with Josh Howe, the owner of the property on this project. And I think Andrew kind of succinctly said it. There's a lot of truck maneuvering issues as we're trying to combine housing and a production space in this location. I know there's been continuing conversation with the adjacent property owner to the north. That currently is a easement that goes through this property, and both parties have access and easement rights. Those easements are in discussion and negotiation. Those are actually private easements. I don't believe affect the city. We have stayed off those easements except for some landscaping that is shown on the front side. I believe that's what the next person may end up talking about, but I'm not sure. So we are, if that becomes a problem in negotiations with the adjacent property owner, we are willing to take those trees off. But other than that, I would be here just to answer questions, and actually if the need arises to respond to any questions or concerns brought up by somebody else.
Very good, thank you. Commissioners, are there any questions of the applicant? Seeing none, I believe we have one person on the line wishing to testify. Craig Andreessen, please unmute yourself, *6, and the floor is yours. Please keep your comments to the applications at hand.
Thank you, Commissioners. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you. Mr. Andreessen, we heard you for a minute, but are not hearing you right now.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Go ahead. Thank you.
Okay. My name is Craig Andreessen. I'm an attorney from the Lohman Abdul Law Firm. I represent ES Investments, the neighboring property. It does business as Libson Auto Truck, City Auto. I'll refer to them as Lisbon. The landscaping plan as submitted, if someone could pull up the landscaping plan, I think the commissioners could see it better. It doesn't correspond with anything that the applicant can actually offer the city in terms of landscaping. I know that the applicant is submitting a plan that exceeds tree and shrub coverage, and that tree and shrub coverage isn't really something that they can actually offer because they don't have the right to put the things here. If you look at near Central Avenue Northeast, there's a couple of large trees that are depicted on the landscaping plan, and in a pretty small entry and exit point there. My client, Libson Twin City Auto, needs access via some pretty large semi-trucks to gain access to their loading dock, which is located on the southernmost point of their building. It's on the south side. So they have to allow these trucks to pull into this 50-foot wide easement area and then unload, auto part truck types of things. These are large, heavy pieces of, transmissions and things like that. They're not something that comes in on a smaller truck. It's pretty large stuff. The traffic in and out of that parking area I know that the applicant has suggested that cars will come in and out of there. Those cars will be blocked for up to 2 hours at a time. So I'm not sure how they plan to accomplish that. There's also, because of the landscaping that's being proposed, trucks approaching from the on a southern going on the south southbound trucks will not be able to simply turn into the parking area. They're going to have to pause, assess the situation. We're worried about traffic stacking on Central Avenue based on that. We're worried about potential accidents with people who, may be, approaching a fast-moving or a slow-moving truck in a fast-moving vehicle. So there are some concerns there. And the plan that was submitted just doesn't reflect reality. We're not asking for the Planning Commission to enforce the terms of our easement. That's a private easement, and it's between our two parties, and we'll enforce it as needed ourselves. But what we're asking for is for the city to go in knowingly to understand what's really being proposed here, and to understand that this, if it were approved and if it were built, could actually put my client out of business after 15 years of being at this location. The line depicted of its construction limits, for instance, is if they were to fence that so that they could accomplish their construction, we couldn't operate. We simply couldn't have a truck pull in and deliver or pick up things. I guess we predict that what will happen here is the applicant will be back before this body or staff if staff has the authority to grant relief, requesting relief from these landscaping provisions, and that you're really not going to get what you think you're getting at this date. So we would urge the Planning Commission to reject the proposed submission and ask them to come back with something that they actually can accomplish.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else wishing to testify on this item? *6 unmutes. All right, seeing nobody, I will close the public hearing on this item, and Commissioner Smiley has a question.
Yes, thank you. I was just kind of wondering, and maybe staff can, hopefully you can illuminate this point for me. Who is in charge of making sure that the terms of an easement are in effect and are not violated by any means? And also, I believe that the applicant kind of alluded to this, something along the lines of the easement being with the previous project and probably not necessarily with the parcel. So if someone can elaborate on that, I would really appreciate it.
Commissioners, so this is an easement between, it's a recorded easement between the two property owners. The city does not have a role in enforcing private easements. It's up to the property owners to enforce the easement themselves, and I think the public comments addressed that. As to what specifically is and isn't allowed by the easement, that's not something that is really part of our jurisdiction in reviewing a land use application. We haven't reviewed the exact text of the easement, and in this case, it's a situation where the applicant's attorney and the attorney of the property owner to the north disagree on what is allowed and not allowed under the terms of the easement, and my understanding is that there's ongoing litigation and negotiation between the two property owners as to how the easement will function moving forward. But we as the city do not have any role in enforcing an easement between two private parties.
Andrew, follow-up question, which is, if the terms of the easement ultimately approve to bar these 2 trees, is the change in the landscaping plan approvable administratively, or would the applicant have to come back to the planning commission?
President Rockwell, thanks for the question. Perhaps Kimberly can jump in if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that that would increase the alternative compliance request and would need to come back to the planning commission as an amendment to the approved site plan.
That is correct.
Very good. All right. Thank you. Commissioners, are there any other questions for staff or further discussion, questions for the applicant? I see I have a motion, but for some reason can't see. Commissioner Olson.
I'll make a motion to approve items A, B, and C with all the stated conditions.
We have a motion to approve items A, B, and C with all stated conditions. Commissioner Meyer.
Second. I second the motion.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Clerk, please call the roll.
Smiley,
Aye.
Marwa,
Aye. Sorry.
okay, Meyer,
Aye.
Olson,
Aye.
Schrader,
Aye.
Sweezy,
Aye.
6-0.
Very good. That motion carries, and that concludes our business with item number 10. We'll move on to item number 11, 336 2nd Street Northeast in Ward 3. City staff is Lindsay Silas. Lindsay, floor is yours.
Good evening, commissioners. I am actually going to present for item 11 and 13 together because these projects are similar projects that are on adjacent parcels. So if IT could pull up the presentation I submitted, I'm going to go through the presentation for both projects together, and then we can have the public hearing for each one. Anyone who's signed up to speak is welcome to then speak individually about each one, or could also combine their comments as I'm doing.
Very good. Thank you. Yeah, we'll take public comments on both simultaneously together. Folks can articulate which item they are speaking to on items 11 and item 13, and then we will hold our vote separately when the commission moves to voting process. Thanks, Lindsay.
Yep. So these two projects are located at 336 and 400 2nd Street Northeast. They are separate projects under separate ownership using the same architect. The sites are adjacent. They will share a driveway that'll be located over the previously vacated 4th Avenue Northeast right-of-way. There are utilities in that space that are the subject of an existing easement. And though that utility easement is proposed to be vacated, the associated vacation is under the 336 project. So the subject sites are zoned R5, which that zoning has been in place for some time. The guidance for both sites in the 2040 plan is Corridor 4, an urban neighborhood. And each site is proposing a 4-story residential building with 49 dwelling units. Next slide, please. So each project requires a front yard setback variance. The setbacks are determined by the existing properties on the block face, and that is 19 feet 8 inches, might have a typo there, to 16 feet for the building. They're also proposing canopies, balconies, and patios, which do not quite comply with the requirements for setbacks for the obstructions in required yards. So those are being included in the front yard setback variance. Each project requires site plan review, and then there's a partial utility easement vacation that is evaluated under the 336 application. And we can go to the next slide. So here's the site, the two sites side by side. The 336 site is slightly larger than the 400 site. I've also highlighted there in blue roughly the location of that previously vacated 4th Avenue right-of-way where there are city sewer utilities. Next slide, please. So here's the site plan showing both buildings, the footprint of both buildings. There's a proposed shared driveway between the two buildings. There will be 2 garage doors on each building, accessing a small garage to get some additional parking along those kind of shared walls. So the 336 property has proposed 30 parking spaces, and the 400 one has 24 parking spaces. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to go through them. I thought it was easier to visualize if we look at 400 and then we look at 336, just so you can visualize it as going north to south. So this is the northern property, ground floor showing the lobby, a ground floor unit, and the parking, as well as mechanical and trash. Next slide, please. And here's the first floor of the 336 project, which has also a ground floor unit, lobby, and some small amenity space, as well as the parking. Next slide, please. And I'll go through this quickly. So you can see from the floor plan, the second floor plan, that there are balconies that are encroaching into the public right-of-way, or into the required setback by more than 4 feet. They're proposed to encroach 5 feet. And then there are balconies on the sides that are more like Juliet balconies to reduce the requirement for a setback variance on those sides. Next slide, please. That's the same situation on this project as well, where there are larger balconies on the front and back. The front balconies project into the front yard setback, and then the side balconies are smaller to avoid requiring a setback on those sides. Next slide, please. Here are the elevations for the 400 project. The proposed exterior materials for both buildings are a mix of a 5/8 inch fiber cement, brick, and less than 5/8 inch fiber cement panels. Next slide, please. These are just the other elevations for 400. And next slide, please. And this is the 336 project, where you can see that they're very complementary materials. Next slide, please. And here as well. Next slide, please. So here are a couple of renderings for the project, showing, you can kind of see in some of these renderings the relationship between the two buildings. Next slide, please. And next slide. And this shows pretty well the driveway here that's proposed to be a shared access driveway. Next slide. And then this is the 336 building. So next slide. And one more. Okay, and then the next slide. So the only requested application besides site plan review is front yard setback variances. The front yard setback in the R5 district is 15 feet, and that is increased where adjacent properties are at an increased setback. Often we see that where an entire block face is kind of at a standard setback, and the district setback is less than the existing front yard setback of the block. However, this is a unique block with unique circumstances. The front yard setbacks on this block vary widely. There's a large variation on the block in terms of years of construction. In addition, the property immediately to the south of the 336 project is actually exempted from that front yard setback determination because it's set back so much farther than the other properties on the block. So there is significant variation there already, and the applicant has proposed a 16-foot setback, which is still increased over the required 15-foot setback in the R5 district. So given the unique situation of the block having significant variation of setbacks, staff found that there was a practical difficulty in complying with the ordinance, and that the proposal to have a 16-foot setback for the building, as well as to allow encroachments in the front yard of balconies, awnings, and patios is reasonable and may increase safety on the street by encouraging more eyes on the street and by contributing to pedestrian scale activity. I also just wanted to mention, I know there were a number of comments received on both projects, including comments that had concerns about the proposal for two 49-unit buildings next door to each other. The requirement for providing affordable housing under the inclusionary zoning policy starts at 50 units. And so there were some concerns about whether it was allowed to have two 49-unit buildings next door to each other. And there is no restriction in the inclusionary zoning policy that prohibits the construction of two 49-unit buildings adjacent to each other. I know that this was discussed as that policy was created, but there wasn't anything adopted into the policy that specifically prohibits that. In addition, the properties are under separate ownership. They are using the same architect and same civil engineering firm. Some in the neighborhood have commented that these should be considered jointly, but for the purposes of this evaluation, they are considered to be separate sites. In addition, the sewer utility that's located under the vacated 4th Avenue right-of-way it precludes the possibility of one larger building on the site. So even if these were under the same ownership and it was one site, those utilities cannot be built upon and would be prohibitive to relocate. I know there were some other comments and concerns about the parking requirements and how there's a greater parking requirement for buildings of 50 units or more. And I just wanted to comment that while these buildings have no parking requirement due to being 49 units and located in proximity to high frequency transit, they are providing parking. The 336 project is providing 30 parking spaces, and the 400 project is providing 24 for a total of 54 spaces. If there was theoretically a 98-unit building here, the parking requirement would be 49 spaces. So even though there is no parking requirement, the two projects together would be meeting the parking requirements of a larger building if there was one in its stead. So staff is recommending approval of the front yard setback variance. The proposal for a 49-unit building of 4 stories on a site that is zoned R5 and guided for 4 stories in the 2040 plan is consistent with city policy. And you can move on to the next slide here. And there are some associated conditions. Given that we're looking at 2 different projects, I didn't write them all down here, but you have them in your staff reports, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Lindsay. Commissioners, are there any questions for staff? Seeing none, I'll open the public hearing and ask the applicant to introduce themselves. I think there are a number of people from the applicant team. *6 unmutes, introduce yourself, and add anything further if you
like. Hey, this is Danny Perkins. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Hello? Okay. Yeah, thank you. I'm one of the owners. My name is Daniel Perkins of the 336 2nd Street side. Thank you all for your time today. Lindsay did a great job describing the project, and I thank her for all the hard work that she has put into it. As she mentioned, we share the same architect as the 400 side, so I'm going to let Sheldon describe some other details to the project as well. So I just wanted to introduce myself, and if you have any questions or concerns or anything, I'll be just right on the line muted. So Sheldon, you can go ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Sheldon, if you're speaking, we cannot hear you. *6 unmutes your line. Also check the mute on your device. *6 unmutes. We still cannot hear you if you're speaking. Sheldon, if you are on the line, we cannot hear you.
Can you hear me? I'm texting with him. I'm going to just conference him in, if that's okay.
Perfect. Thank you. We can hear you, yes.
1 second. Okay, great. All right, Sheldon,
okay.
Everyone, yes.
Very good.
Should be.
Thank you. Sorry for the technical issue there.
Great.
Appreciate the patience. So, as
please state your name and address for the record,
sure.
and then also clarify if you're representing both item 11 and 13 here. I believe you are, but
sure.
to clarify.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yes, Sheldon Berg with DJR Architecture. And I am representing, or we are the architect for both parcels. And we are looking at them individually with different clients and perspectives anyhow. They did, as clients wanted to work together to add some efficiencies and how they proceeded with the projects. At this point, we are only looking to proceed from a construction standpoint with the 338 project. We do not have a date for the moving forward just yet on the other projects. I think Lindsay gave a very good job of giving an outline of any issues and considerations that we've had for the project. She went through the materials, the active uses that we have fronting the street, as well as giving some background on some of the site elements that were key to how we've developed the site plan and let both units or both projects work together to make a more pedestrian-friendly street frontage. Certainly by having a single curb cut for two properties versus a couple of curb cuts. That's something we went through with some detail with Lindsay at the very beginning, and had worked at that this would be a more beneficial scheme. And I think I'm just otherwise available for comments and questions as they come up.
Very good. Thank you. Commissioners, are there any questions for the architect? All right. Seeing no one, we'll continue down the list here. Ben Tasek is next on the list. I believe that he may also be with the applicant. Commissioner Marwa has a question first.
Hi, I guess this question is kind of for both of the way that the site and the configuration is done, and kind of for the architect in that regards. Looking at both of these are going to be 49 units. It seems, strategic that this falls right below the level to have to include affordable housing in any inclusionary zoning. Is there any thought about, how one of these could be 50 units to hit that component? I guess why is it that they're 49 units? I'm curious.
Sure. I believe I can answer that. I think that the 49 units was a function really of a couple of things. I mean, obviously the scale of the site and what was allowable with the setbacks that we have and the physical characteristics of the properties, as well as trying to be having a reasonable amount of parking, even though parking's not a high driver on the project. With the high frequency transit, we did still want to have a modest level to at least meet the real life sort of needs of the site. As far as squeezing another unit in to get to 50, I think that we kind of got to a level where there was a comfort level with the efficiency of the units going up and with the amount of, at least a modest amount of amenities on the ground floor to make that make sense for these buildings. That, adding another 1, 2, 3, 4 units was not really working for us or for the project. And so that's kind of where it left us. I mean, obviously, these are smaller lots, and so we're trying to keep, I guess, the scale at a reasonable size.
Commissioner Smiley, question for the applicant.
Yeah, I just have a quick question. Kind of wondering if, and pardon me for any repetition if it's included in the application. I would like to hear from the applicant about considerations for energy saving and energy efficiency practices, as well as any potentially renewable energy used on site. I guess with proximity to the Mississippi River, it just seems like such a prime opportunity to potentially include those best practices in the site plan.
And Sheldon, maybe you can help me with this as well. I know there's a laundry list of items that we have increased our spec book to work with to make sure that we do have best practices.
And please, please introduce state your name before.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, Danny Perkins, one of the owners, again, of 336 2nd Street Northeast. In addition to, we are working with Excel on the rebate program as well to set up best practices. And then also, in addition to that, we are looking into providing a green roof on the 2nd floor where there's an overhang there to again include in part of our best practices. And then Sheldon, maybe if you can elaborate too.
Sure. Sure. Yep. We are involved with the 336 project with Energy Design Assistance with Excel and Centerpoint Energy. And what that does is helps us, I guess, accentuate the amount of energy efficiency that we can use. We can incorporate into the project. And to give some specific examples of that would be higher installation values for walls and roof, low E windows, Energy Star appliances, LED light fixtures. As far as from a site standpoint, we have we're using drought tolerant native plantings, trying to maximize the amount of plantings that we actually do have, and to allow a fair amount of natural infiltration into the site. The patio that we're using is pervious paving as well, and I think there's probably a longer list, but I'm not sure if there was a targeted types that you're interested in.
This is good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Mark Ivaskevich, owner of the 400 2nd Street property. I'd just like to add
Very good.
the same practices we're conducting on that site.
Very good. Thank you. All right. With that, we'll continue on our list for testifiers. We're taking testimony again. Reminders to the testifiers on both 11 and 13. A lot of folks are signed up to testify on both. Please, you only get one chance to testify. Ben Tasik, if you wish to testify, please press *6 to unmute yourself.
Yes, I believe I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Let me start out. Commissioners, thank you for taking my comments regarding both of these proposals. That would be Plan 10979 and Plan 1141 on behalf of the St. Anthony West Neighborhood Organization, Stano. My name is Dan Kuzlik. I'm a member of the Stano Board of Directors, and I reside at 221 2nd Street Northeast here in Minneapolis. I think if I could just briefly start out by articulating the purpose of Stano as defined in our organization's bylaws. It'll take just a moment here. The purpose of the St. Anthony West Neighborhood Organization, Stano, shall be to promote the betterment of the neighborhood by encouraging widespread citizen participation in all decision-making processes affecting St. Anthony West neighborhood. The organization shall achieve this by 1, developing a sense of community in the neighborhood, 2, providing mechanisms for neighborhood residents to be well informed on issues and activities affecting the neighborhood, 3, and this is important here, enhancing and maintaining the physical, social, economic, cultural, and recreational environment of the neighborhood, 4, reviewing and offering guidance regarding urban renewal plans or proposed zoning changes, maintaining the residential character of the neighborhood, and promoting community safety, crime prevention, neighborhood effectiveness, and commercial establishment and housing quality in a non-discriminatory manner. So I think that's something that you can have as your background to this. Based upon the directions of these bylaws, Strano requests that the Planning Commission deny the proposed variances and not approve the site plans for the 2 development proposals presented here. Let me briefly amplify a rationale for our request. First, regarding the variance request by the developer, we ask that you deny the variance's front yard setbacks from approximately 19 feet to 16 feet, and then to deny further encroachments of 12-foot canopies, 11-foot balconies, and 8-foot patios. We feel that these encroachments are excessive in their own right, but even more so when connected to the mass of a 4-story building in a neighborhood of much shorter structures. The proposed setbacks are also inconsistent with the setbacks along 2nd Street Northeast. And I believe that Lindsay has given you some materials, and if you look at page 3, you'll see that we presented curb distances from current homes, from curb to the home, and that was calculated by a fluke 4160 distance meter. Secondly, we request that you deny these plans for the following reasons. 1, the site plans fail to include affordable housing units as required by the Minneapolis inclusionary zoning policy. While this policy speaks to developments of 50 or more units, we feel these proposals should be viewed as a total campus of 98 units and 2 buildings. Supporting our contention is the fact that there is a close affiliation between these 2 developers, and the very fact that these developers propose a shared common driveway, are using the same architects, and are using the same engineering firms. To us, it's obviously a way to sidestep the proposals and the requirements for affordable housing. 2, our neighborhood boundaries have seen unprecedented development over the past several years, with all projects being brought forward at market rates and none that can be identified as affordable housing. 3, while Stano recognizes the needs of a mix of rental units in a given area, currently built and proposed developments in our neighborhood would result in a lopsided effect of 72% of developer-owned rental units versus only 28% of owner-occupied units. 4, since our neighborhood has almost no vacant parcels, the trend of tearing down owner-occupied housing in favor of rental developments will continue at this proposed scale that we've seen. 5, the Stano small area plan created a transition to sustainability and healthy density, and we continue to support that direction. We are not taking a NIMBY approach to density. However, we support that sustainable density for our border streets like Broadway, and we have supported that type of development even in the face of opposition from our own constituents. In addition, let me focus a bit more on the deliverables of the smaller area plan, small plan. 2nd Street was designed in the plan for a maximum of 2.5 units. Also, connection to the environment and the community value, but the current proposals fail to have green or sustainable design. Also, landscaping has limited benefit to the pollinator effect, and the tree canopy is diminished. Our neighborhood sits on the banks of the Mississippi River, and the environment cannot be ignored. Also, walkability, connection of neighborhoods, and safety is not improved. Instead, a proposal for a harsh 47-foot wall sits almost on top of the public sidewalks. In addition, lighting plays an important role in improving the social and safety experiences, but no lighting plan is part of these proposals. Also, proposed driveway location is a public safety hazard, we feel, as a 4-way intersection results at 2nd Street and 4th Avenue Northeast. In closing, it's evidence from the above that proposals do not meet the city's land use requirements nor improve the livability of our neighborhood. We seek your help in this matter and request denial of the variances and that the plan sites not be approved as presented. Thank you for consideration to our request to deny both the variances and the site plans for these 2 projects. I'll close there.
Thank you very much. Next up is Sally Granskirch. If there's Sally Granskirch on the line, please unmute yourself, *6, and state your name and address for the record. Sir, Sally Granskirch. I may be mispronouncing your last name. I apologize. *6 unmutes. Is there Ben Patasek on the line? *6 unmutes. Hello?
I'm with DJ Architecture and I don't have any comments.
Very good, thank you. I assume that is Ben Patasek speaking. Is there a Marcus Galto on the line? *6 unmutes. Marcus Galto wishing to testify on items 11 and 13, or either individually. I don't hear a Marcus Galto. Is there a Ryan Weber on the line? Please press *6 to unmute yourself. There's a Ryan Weber on the line.
Hello, this is Ryan.
Hello, we can hear you. Please state your name and address for the record. And
my name is Ryan Weber. I live across the street at 337 2nd Street Northeast. I just basically like to echo what Dan Kuzlik was eloquently stated. I live across the street, and I think plopping these 2 massive developments and shoehorning them into those 2 small lots is going to change the character of the neighborhood completely. Adding 110 bedrooms on 2 lots, that'll basically quadruple the number of people on the block. And in addition to that, those structures don't really fit with the character of 2nd Street. It's a quiet side street, and adding these 2 structures, 110 bedrooms, is gonna. Hello? Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, whoever that is. This is testimony right now. Please mute yourself. Go ahead, Ryan. Hello? Sorry about that. Yes,
that's
please
okay.
mute yourself. Go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, so fundamentally, I think it's just good.
All right. we are all ears. Sorry about that again. Ryan.
Hello, *6.
Yeah.
Hello, *6.
Whoever that is, whoever that is who continues to say hello, please mute yourself right now. Please mute yourself using
somebody else is speaking.
I know they are.
So I'll just try to continue on here.
All right, I apologize, Mr. Weber.
So basically, it's going to change the character of the block completely. That's why myself and my neighbors live there. It's because of what it currently is, and it does not. It's not. Sorry, this is kind of distracting, but quadrupling the number of residents on the whole block within the span of those two developments side by side, I think is going to completely change the character of the neighborhood. And in addition, the architectural design of them, where they just kind of shoehorned onto those two lots with only 8-foot setbacks for the patios. I think it's going to be quite an eyesore as well. And also, it's already challenging to park there. There's no parking allowed on a good portion of 2nd Street until you hit 4th Avenue. And so those spots are generally full. There's been a little bit of a reprieve with COVID and people working from home, but it can be very difficult to find parking spots within a couple blocks. And adding another, 110 bedrooms onto that. Granted, I do appreciate that they're putting in 54 spaces. That will help somewhat, but I don't think it's sufficient to alleviate the additional the issue of additional vehicles. And this other woman, I think, really wants to say something, so I'll leave it at that. But I would echo what Dan Kuzlik said. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you. That was power testimony. Three stars. Thank you very much.
Your time and your patience.
Back at you. All right. I believe that is Sally Grants-Korsh seeking to testify. Go ahead and unmute yourself now with *6, and the other testifier is done. Thank you. This person who was trying to speak a couple moments ago still on the line. *6 unmutes. We're ready to hear your testimony if you're ready.
Chair Rockwell, I did get an email from Sally Grants-Korsh. I do believe that was her who was trying to speak, and she should still be on the line if she could press *6 to unmute herself.
Thank you, Kimberly. Sally Grants-Korsh, if you...
Yes,
yeah,
thank you.
There you are.
Sally
Please
Grants-Korsh,
state your name and address for the record.
I really apologize. I was following in on the live webcam, and it turns out there's a delay there, and that's why I couldn't get through. I apologize. My name is Sally Grants-Korsh. I live at 83 6th Avenue Northeast. And I just want to say that really the Planning Commission is being fooled on this project, as has been stated many times before, that it was even noted by the representative Sheldon Berg at the Stano June 25th presentation that they are a collective, his exact words. It would not have been done separately. This project would not have been done separately, and I suspect that the owners are working together, and maybe it's just not official. I don't know that. But they are sneaking in this, has two projects to avoid the regulation for affordability, and it is a 98 apartment project. And this is the systematic racism that is done to house wealthy white people, and our neighborhood doesn't want to continue to add these one-bedroom units that has been done before on Main Street and the Julia and the Serene. We want to add diversity to our area, and that's been part of our small area plan. This is a 98 unit, not a 49 unit. And I appreciate the comment about adding one more unit, but it's very calculated that this was done. It's very calculated that this was done at 49 units. So I do respectfully think, urge you to reject this setback. And I appreciate the work that Stano did and their very articulate documentation. But further, I wanted, for your edification, just remember the planning history of Minneapolis, and that you're creating in 2020 what the Whittier neighborhood did in the 1960s. And during that time frame, they built huge stick-built one-bedroom apartment buildings covering lot line to lot line with no livability and no green space, which this has no livability or green space. Those three-story walk-ups destroyed that sense of community and took millions of dollars later on in the 80s and 90s from the federal government and the Dayton-Hudson Foundation that funded the Whittier Alliance to reinvest, alter, and take back and safely renovate that whole community. This proposal is a slab-on-grade development for parking with three-story apartment building plopped on top of it, going close to 50 feet. It's built in 2 phases. The materials are as poor as the ones used in Whittier, 5/8" fiber paneling. This is housing it for wealthy white renters, and it does not reflect the many one-bedroom and efficiency units that have been added to our neighborhood in the last 5 years. There is no affordability for families. This is one project that's being done to avoid those affordability regulations. Density would have been better if it was one structure with underground parking that could have been done. I urge you to consider this and to not approve the setback and to really rethink this, because it feels very duplicitous even if they stay there as separate ownership. So sorry to take so long, and I really hope you'll consider this for the future, to not do these wall-to-wall, really 2.5-story walk-up buildings that are plopped up four stories high. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. All right, we have Marcus Gatto on the line. Are you able to unmute yourself? *6 unmutes if you wish to testify. Marcus Gatto, *6 to unmute if you're able. The remaining folks on the line, I believe, the remaining folks on the line on my list are not actually wishing to testify, but if you do wish to testify, please unmute. I've got Michael Pink, Peter Keeley, and Mark Owaskowitz, which I believe is the owner of the 400 project. All right, is there anybody else wishing to testify on items 11 or 13? So item 13 is 400 2nd Street Northeast, and item number 11 is 336 2nd Street Northeast in Ward 3. If anyone is wishing to testify, I know there is one testifier who is trying to unmute. But if there's anybody else, please press *6 to unmute yourself and let us know you're here. All right. So if I look at staff for assistance on this, I know that we have Marcus Gatto is on the line, or maybe on the line, and is trying to testify. Is this still true?
I apologize. Am I being heard?
Yes, you are. Is this Mr. Gatto?
I apologize, sir. I apologize to the commission here. We were having technical difficulties.
That is okay. If you could state your name and address for the record, go ahead and testify. Thank you.
Absolutely. Marcus Gatto. I live at 407 2nd Street Northeast. And I have no affiliation other than I'm a resident in the Stano neighborhood. I'd like to thank the commission for allowing me to present today. I want to reiterate a couple of things that we've heard that were already presented both by the representative of our local board and by Sally. And I appreciate the comments that they gave, so I won't highlight anything that they have already said, but they have covered a lot of the technical elements that are concerning. I think what I want us to do is take a little bit of a step back and ask the following question, which is what is the purpose and why is it that the commission is asked to grant variances? Why is it asked to make changes to what we use as the basic city code? And the purpose should be is to do something that adds to the city as a whole, that provides some sort of tangible additional benefit to the city. And in this case, as we've heard from this project, basically everything is being done to try and shoehorn as large a project as possible and actually to exceed basically the size requirements that they could otherwise use into a space that won't actually hold it. And there's not really anything that the city, the neighborhood, the community is getting back other than increased density. There's no housing ownership that's coming in. We've already talked about that this won't meet the inclusionary zoning plan, so there won't be projects offered for 60% or less of AMI at any point. We understand that it's not going to visually match with the area that's around it. We also understand that really what's being done here is two projects that are really one project are being presented together. And I would implore the commission to look at this as such, particularly because of the matching easements that are being granted. And you're seeing that what really one project needs the other to subsist because both of them are so close to the line spaces that they can fit into that there's really no other way to operate around that. They have to be able to have these extra spaces because they're within 1 foot of their development line as a line that they're allowed to use on the edges of the property. And actually, when it comes to the front, they need that additional space to shoehorn in the largest possible project. So the question I think that the commission needs to ask itself is, when we are looking at this project and you're looking to be granting approval for this project, why? Why should this project be given special consideration to allow it to violate the rules? And that's really what a variance is. A variance is a violation of a rule. Why is it that this project should be allowed to violate the rules? And then the question comes back and says, what is the tangible benefit that this project is providing? What is unique and good about this project that stands out such that we should say we want this project instead of the rules? And I can't see, and I haven't seen it presented at any point by the developer, the architect, the owners. And by the way, I think it's worth noting that we see the same architect, we see the same applicant, we see matching projects, we see matching materials. This is one project masquerading as two. What is being offered? What is the community getting back in exchange for granting that variance, for granting that setback variance, for allowing balconies to encroach, for allowing patios to encroach, for allowing less canopy than is required? What does the community get back? And at least to this point, it does not appear that anything has been offered to the community, either on a city level, on a neighborhood level, or on a block level. And with those things being said, I would ask that the commission reject the proposal and say to the developers that if you want to build a project of the size that you are building, that either the project needs to meet the rules as laid out, or that there needs to be something else provided that is a tangible benefit to the community, to the neighborhood, which is Stano has said it does not, and to the area that's immediately surrounded. And I would rest based on that and the comments that I've placed in the public comment that I submitted earlier. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anybody else on the line wishing to testify? *6 unmutes. All right. With that, I will close the public hearing. Commissioners, we have 2 separate projects before us. Item number 11 and item number 13. Adjacent properties, 3 applications for item number 11 and 2 for item number 13. Commissioner Smiley has a question and comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. similar to Commissioner Marwa's question and some of the concerns that are raised about affordable housing, that is my main concern in terms of, because I can see all the concerns that are being raised, and I share the same thing. And it just kind of feels like it's just the numbers are right on the border to not have to comply with any kind of like, it's just not, it's almost there but not there. But if the two were together, it would have required that. And while in general I'm very supportive of combining resources, and I think that's a great idea to make sure that the two adjacent projects are aligned with one another and use the same kinds of access points and things like that. I do have a hard time with the feeling of that these two are very connected. And I guess the question that comes up here for me now for staff is that, are there any policies and or considerations from the city that potentially addresses that? Like, I understand the two applications are separate, but is there at any point is the question possible to be asked that, are you two together? Are these two projects pretty much together or something along those lines? And I can see that Kimberly is saying that she can answer that.
So as a lot of you know, the work that we did on the inclusionary housing policy and the ordinance was months, if not years in the making. And there's two pieces to it. So we have the unified housing policy that is completely outside of the zoning code and not the purview of this commission. And we have the portion that is in the zoning code, which only contains the threshold for how many units trigger inclusionary zoning. That was set at 50 units. And we're in an interim period where for the first 500 units that come in buildings between 20 and 49 units, the threshold is 50. Once we hit 500 units between 20 and 50, so in buildings with between 20 and 50 units, then the trigger is 20 units. So right now we're in that interim phase where the trigger is 50. We did take into consideration the fact that it's possible that a developer could come in with two side-by-side projects and not trigger the policy. You know, it's something that, one, because this is a temporary condition that's being phased in, you know, the number of units. So yes, it's 500 overall permitted units in the city. So far, since the policy has been in place, we have permitted 30 units. The more 49 unit buildings we get, or the more buildings we get in that range between 20 and 49, the closer we get to 500 and the closer we get to bringing the threshold down to 20 units. So it's not something that wasn't considered. These two are not one zoning lot because they're not under common ownership, and with that, they cannot be considered as one project. If we were to change to include some language that said that side-by-side projects at 49 units would trigger it, they would still need to be under common ownership, which these two are not. But also, just to clarify, we're in this temporary condition. So we're phasing it in. Really, the threshold is 20, but we're in this interim period where we're phasing in the inclusionary zoning requirements. So, you can't have two residential buildings on one lot. There's a lot of factors that went into this. Staff actually encouraged them to have a single access point instead of 2 separate access points because that's more in line with the zoning code. And with that, it does make it look more like the 2 property owners are in cooperation with one another, but that was intended to reduce the number of curb cuts and the impact to the pedestrian environment in front of the 2 projects as a direction from staff. So go ahead with your follow-up question.
Thank you, Kimberly, for explaining what you just did. I now know a lot more than I did 5 minutes ago. My only question about the 500 is that now I understand that it's citywide, but I also want to know what is the time limit on the 500? Is it between now and is it for the next 10 years? Is it up to 2040? Is it like when does that 500 restart, if you will?
It never restarts.
Oh, okay. So moving forward, if we do the 500, we reach the 500, moving forward, the threshold is always going to be 20.
So it's actually written, it's 6 months after we hit 500, but yes, as soon as we hit 500 and wait out that 6-month period, then going forward indefinitely, it's 20.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, are there any further questions? Commissioner Schrader.
Oh, thank you. Just wanted to follow up to the commissioners. Those are great questions. And some of it besides kind of how Kimberly really explained how we set that limit, there was always going to be a 1 under problem. We see what we're seeing here, a 49 units instead of 50. When we looked at the data, it was going to be what they were suggesting was inclusionary zoning for 50 and above. Anything from 20 to 50 was going to be pretty hard. What the data was showing us was that it was going to be very hard to pencil out for developments, and we certainly need more developments in the 20 to 50 range. But we also absolutely need more affordable housing. And so kind of what you're seeing is kind of the results of that. Something that will be phased in, something that we are looking at the certain unit count. It is something that we weren't really sure what would happen. So now we're kind of starting to see how many units will be developed and still having a commitment to making sure there's affordable housing. Also, there was a lot of thought into where this could actually happen. Where would you build a side-by-side, building that would get under that? And there was a pretty limited amount of spaces that they could do that throughout the city.
Thank you, Commissioner Schrader. Commissioners, follow-up questions, clarifications, discussion. Commissioner Meyer.
Thank you. So if these were one project, how many affordable units would they have to build? Is it 8%? Would it be like 7 or 8?
So again, there are a number of ways to comply with the unified housing policy. One way to comply with it is on-site production, which would be 8%. There's also, now that we're past the June 1st deadline for phasing in the other ways, you can do an in lieu fee or off-site production. So it would depend on how the applicant would choose to do that. But again, in this case, it is not required.
Okay, so I guess, I agree with other commissioners. I mean, it seems clearly that the intent of the number of units being at 49 is to sidestep the inclusionary zoning ordinance. I guess I want to see, I'm looking for guidance from staff. Like, is that an acceptable reason to reject a site plan or reject a setback?
No, it is not. So you have the site plan review standards that you're required to evaluate that do not have anything to do with site plan or with the inclusionary housing policy or the unified housing policy. You also have a setback variance for each project to consider, which has the 3 required findings based on practical difficulties unique to the parcel, whether or not the variance proposed is consistent with the adopted policy and the intent of the ordinance, and the impacts on the surrounding properties. So none of the applications before this commission are asking you to evaluate whether or not this project is consistent with the unified housing policy or should trigger any requirements for affordable housing. It's also worth noting they are not asking for increased height, so we are not doing the evaluation under the CUP as to whether or not there is a reasonable means for further achieving comp plan goals. We only have the site plan review and the variance.
Okay, that's helpful clarification. I mean, so I guess, you know, I'm frustrated that we have this under one situation. You know, I thought for Councilmember Schrader is, you know, I mean, you're always going to have some degree of under one, but they could have been smoother. Like you could have, instead of like a steep cliff that you have from 49 to 50, it could have been, I don't know, maybe more spread out so that you have to do a couple more at 40 or whatever. But I don't know, that's maybe something to consider in the future. But I mean, if that's not a reason that we can reject it, then I guess I can't use that reason.
Commissioners, I would suggest that we take these questions up, these policy questions up in a committee of the whole forum. And you know, commission certainly has a policy-making role, as Kimberly stated. You know, in this particular case, at this time, there are 2 applications or 3 in the case of vacation for item 11, and you know, our analysis on these items is the set of findings that we're required to make and the set of considerations under site plan. And there's 2 elements for alternative compliance and you know, the variance standards, and we have to do that analysis based on those required findings and impose any conditions upon the project in a way that is consistent with our sort of constitutional requirements of creating a nexus and kind of proportional conditions. So I think that this is a good discussion and one that we can certainly take up and explore how the commission as a body thinks about these. I see we have a motion, Commissioner Olson.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve items A, B, and C with all stated conditions, and I can speak to that if you want.
Very good, Commissioner Smiley.
Let's second the motion.
Very good. We have a motion and a second. Commissioner Olson.
Yeah, I just think that, you know, we kind of touched on this, and I appreciate the conversation about the, you know, one under concern. But I think what we're being asked to consider today is much narrower than that. We're looking at a variance for the front yard setback, and I think staff have laid that out very clearly. And I agree with their analysis.
Very good. And I'm sorry, I was responding to comments. Can you clarify the motion again? This is for item number 11?
Yes, item number 11, A, B, and C.
All right, item number 11, A, B, and C. Commissioners, we have a motion before us. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Smiley?
Aye.
Marwa?
Aye.
Meyer?
Aye.
Olson?
Aye.
Schrader?
Aye.
Sweezy?
Aye.
6-0.
That motion carries, and that concludes our business with item number 11. Commissioners, we still have item number 13 before us. Commissioner Olson.
Chair Schroeder, this is Commissioner Caprini. I just wanted to let you all know that I am here and I have been listening.
Very good. Thank you, Commissioner Caprini. Commissioner Olson.
I'll make a motion to approve items A and B on item 13 with all of the stated conditions.
All right, we have a motion to approve items A and B consistent with staff conditions. Do we have a second? Commissioner Smiley.
I second the motion.
With a motion and a second, is there any further discussion? Let's say before we vote, I think we had some good testimony, around the complications of this project. I believe that staff and our discussion kind of covered most of the points addressed in the testimony. But I do want to note, particular that on these projects, we really are limited to the conditions to the applications that are before us. And so, and also limited to consideration consistent with the zoning code and the 2040 plan, which kind of incorporates the guidance from small area plans. We heard several items about small area plans, but the guidance in the 2040 plan is what governs the bulk and the allowable density here ultimately. And there is work to do on some of the elements on walkable neighborhoods, which we have in the 2040 plan. There's work to do on pollinator-friendly habitat, but I think that the purview of this commission in these decisions are the applications before us. Clerk, please call the roll.
Caprini. Smiley.
Aye.
Marwa.
Aye.
Meyer.
Aye.
Olson.
Aye.
Schrader.
Aye.
Sweezy.
Aye.
6-0.
That motion carries. That concludes our business with item number 13. Next item up is item number 17, 35 Groveland Terrace, Ward 7. Staff is Lindsay Salas again.
And I have a presentation for this one, if that could be pulled up, please. Good evening again, commissioners. This project, which the presentation should be up shortly, is a proposal for a 3-story, 5-unit building at 35 Groveland Terrace. The site is currently occupied by a 3-story single-family home. There was an application before the Heritage Preservation Commission regarding the demolition of this home, which was approved as it is a potential historic resource. The site is zoned R2, and in the 2040 plan, it's guided for interior 2 and urban neighborhood. And the proposed building is 3 stories with 5 units. Next slide, please. The application, or the project, requires the following applications: petition to rezone property from the R2 district to the R3 district, conditional use permit to increase the maximum height in the R3 district from 2.5 stories or 35 feet to 3 stories or 44 feet, and site plan review. Next slide, please. Here is a site plan of the site. The site has a significant grade change. To orient yourself, the site faces faces Groveland Terrace, which is across the street from the fields adjacent to the Walker Art Center. And the current structure has a large driveway in the front that occupies a lot of the front yard because the yard is on a steep slope. And this proposal, and you'll see this in more clarity from the renderings, proposes to cut the driveway into the hill so that the driveway can be narrower and more concentrated towards the north of the site. Next slide, please. So the applicant has proposed with this one level of underground parking with 11 parking spaces and bike parking on this level, as well as storage. Next slide, please. And then due to the grade change, that entire level is kind of cut into the hill and would not be visible from the street. So this is the first floor. Both the first and second floors would contain 2 units each, and the top floor would just contain 1 unit. Next slide, please. Here's the second floor, and next slide. And here's the third floor with the 1 unit and some outdoor green roof area. Next slide, please. So here are elevations of the structure. So the fact that it is on a hill and kind of built into the hill doesn't change staff's determination that it's 3 stories. Height is measured from a point 10 feet in front of the structure towards the street, which is farther down the hill. So measuring from that point to the peak is the 44 feet, and our definition of a story is more has to do with how the building appears from the street, and because this building includes the underground parking, it has these taller ceilings and is not is not kind of fully embedded in that hill for that first floor. It is considered to be 3 stories. Next slide, please. So the applicant has submitted more images than this, but I thought this was a good kind of demonstration of the building in context. The building is 3 stories, but the existing building is also, it's a single family home, but it is also 3 stories. So the applicant had submitted some of these drawings to show that while the proposed building will be bulkier than the building that is there, it will actually be shorter at the peak than the existing building. So I did include this image. And next slide, please. So here's a rendering of the building. The 3rd floor is set back from the street, and due to kind of the hill condition may not be very visible from the rear of the site, the building will appear to be 2 stories and does have that driveway more cut into the hill, whereas the present condition includes a really large driveway that kind of goes up the hill to the existing building. Next slide, please. So staff evaluated the 3 applications for this project. The site is guided for urban neighborhood and interior 2. The residential use is consistent with urban neighborhood, and the proposal to rezone the site from R2 to R3 is consistent with the guidance in interior 2. The kind of assessment of interior 2 is that it could be consistent with R3 because R3 does allow a little bit additional or a little more density than in R2. In addition, the R3 district does have a maximum height of 2.5 stories, which is consistent with the interior 2 designation in the comprehensive plan. In the R2 district, there would not a building of more than 2 units would not be permitted. So staff does find that the proposed rezoning is consistent with the comprehensive plan. Next slide, please. However, the proposed height is not consistent with the adopted policy in the comprehensive plan. The applicant has proposed to increase the height from 2.5 stories or 35 feet to 3 stories or 44 feet. The interior 2 district specifically calls for a maximum of 2.5 stories or 35 feet, and it does not include any mechanism for increasing the height, unlike some of the higher density districts that do allow for height increases. This district does not allow for that. And because the site plan review application is for a 3-story, 44-foot tall building, staff is recommending denial of both applications. Next slide, please. So staff is recommending approval of the rezoning application and denial of the conditional use permit and site plan review applications, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Commissioners, are there any questions? I'm getting some feedback or something. Are there any questions for staff? All right, seeing none, I'll ask the applicant sorry, Commissioner Smiley.
I apologize. I was a bit slow in typing the word question. I guess my question for staff is just a procedural question. With the denial of items 17B and C, I guess I'm just wondering what the next step is for the application.
if the rezoning were to be approved, and the other so basically if the conditional use permit and site plan review applications were denied, that would effectively deny the building as it's presently proposed. The approval of the rezoning application would stay with the property, so the property would be rezoned to R3, which would allow for the applicant to potentially revise the proposal and come back with a 2.5-story building or a 2-story building that would comply with the height requirement in Interior 2 without having to go through the rezoning process at that time.
Thanks, Leslie. Any other questions for staff? All right, seeing none, I will ask the applicant to unmute and introduce themselves, add any further context. *6 unmutes.
Thank you. This is, good evening, Commissioners. This is Craig Martin with Peterson Keller Architecture. I'll start by introducing the applicant and the homeowners of 35 Groveland Terrace, and then we can discuss the design and application request a little bit further. Carol Lansing with Beggary, Drinker, Biddle, and Wreath is also part of the team, and she'll be touching base on the 2040 comprehensive plan and how this project approaches that. So to start, if staff could pull up the presentation I provided while the homeowners speak, we'll then jump into those exhibits. Mohsen Sadeghi, welcome. Please state your name and tell the commissioners a little bit about the proposed project.
Mohsen. Okay. My name is Mohsen Sadeghi. My wife, Julie, and I purchased the property in 1975 and have since put endless amount of energy, money, and love into the house to make it functional for our family needs. Over the last 44 years, we have operated a small business, raised 3 children, and created countless memories in the house. However, we have reached a point in our lives where the home is no longer able to meet our needs. We want to continue living at 35 Groveland Terrace in our older years, but the existing house and the driveway are not safe for us. The extreme slope of the driveway is very dangerous in the winter and has led to numerous injuries and car accidents. The kitchen and dining area are located at the back of the home on the 2nd level and are accessed through a maze of stairs, making day-to-day access and carrying of grocery and packages extremely challenging. We have been working with Peterson Keller for almost a year to explore renovation as a single family or multi-family residence for new construction. They concluded that the existing design and topographical problems cannot be solved through the renovation. When we thought about the possibility of new construction for our needs, the neighborhood, and the city, we think that building a multi-family dwelling rather than a large single-family home is the right choice. It would add density near downtown and fit the context of neighboring homes in size, height, and use of quality building material. We think a contemporary flat roof design is the more attractive and appropriate for our times and compatible with the existing varied architectural character of the block. We want to replace the 3-story residence with the new 3-story residence, but we need the CUP to do that. We hope you will approve the zoning and the conditional use permit. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohsen. This is Craig Martin again here with Peterson Keller. So if we go to page 1, please. I want to start by looking at the existing home and then quickly looking at the built environment of the neighborhood. As Mosen had stated, the existing home is 3 stories and built into the hillside along Groveland Terrace, as you'll see in the first picture. And if you can go to page 2, please. The property is neighbored by an older home converted into an apartment building to the east. There's a home converted into a gallery business. And then even further east than that, there's a large church building. To the west is a new 2-unit condominium building. And then kitty corner is a large 60 condominium building. The Walker Art Center is directly north across Groveland Terrace, and behind the property, up higher on the hill, and overlooking the existing home, are single-family residences and a home converted into condominiums as well. Page 3, please. So 35 Groveland Terrace is it's a single-family home right now with 1 apartment. It was a business at one point in its history, and it's been added onto multiple times throughout its past. So as Lindsay had alluded to, last fall, the property was historic by the Heritage Preservation Commission due to its diminished integrity and non-historical interior or exterior significance. And as Melissa had stated earlier, the home has a dangerous 15% slope driveway that makes remodeling and reuse of the existing property difficult for a multifamily residence without extensive work that would even further alter the character of that home. So in lieu of remodeling, the Sotheby's and the design team felt it was beneficial to pursue new construction that could maximize the property size, location, and then also utilize energy efficient practices promoted in the 2040 plan. Page 4, please. So the design, as you'll see in a minute, is influenced by local landmarks such as the basilica's light stone and the dark metal roof at high contrast. Some of the forms were inspired by the Walker Art Center, and the simple exterior stone cladding is reminiscent of many nearby structures. Page 5, please. So the use of masonry, large porches, and decorative railings off the front facade create an active and vibrant streetscape. The scale and the height of the building is such that it complements the neighboring structures. We're not trying to go above those structures or too far below. We really want to mirror what is currently on the site. So it doesn't tower over adjacent property or block views from behind either, but rather it's nestled into the hillside and is intentionally designed to have a similar roof height to what I'll call kind of the skyline of the hill there. So a shorter building on this lot would appear like a hole that would disrupt the existing character of the area. So a 2-story or even a 2.5 might not be the appropriate use. Page 6, please. So this is a rendering standing at the sidewalk, and Lindsay had talked about it as well. It's essentially what you'll see in this image is we're respecting the concept of a 2.5-story building by stepping back the 3rd floor, but continuing that 2-story facade along Groveland Terrace. Page 7, please. And sustainable practices were also at the forefront of the Sotheby's requests. They were interested in reducing the amount of asphalt driveway on the lot by pulling vehicles indoors below grade. They wanted to use roof gardens to help slow the rainwater runoff, but also provide a beautiful landscape for properties looking over the building from the south. And we're also looking into renewable energy sources, such as the solar panel system, to help offset the cost of electricity. And then large, efficient windows and doors obviously maximize daylighting through each of the units. Page 8, please. So the map you'll see come up on the screen here mirrors the concept of the 2040 plan by showing just how promoting density areas close to downtown help facilitate walking, biking, riding, public transportation throughout the city. So this is a prime location to promote densification in a responsible manner while still maintaining the character of single-family homes. The Sotheby's could have chosen to build up to 9 units based on the lot area. However, they chose to build 5 units so as to maintain the character and style of a single-family home along Lowry Hill. And page 9, if it's coming up here. So the elevations that you'll see show the building nestled into the hillside and designed to match midpoints of neighboring roof lines. It also shows how the entire 1st floor is buried into grade at the rear, allowing the 2nd floor units to walk out the grade. And then page 10 is also an example of just the roof lines, how they line up along Groveland Terrace there. And page 11, and then if you can go to page 12 right away. So the first slide, page 11, is the existing conditions. And page 12 is a rendering looking towards the southeast, just to get a sense of the scale. Page 13 and 14 is also another example. This is looking from the opposite corner, looking towards the northwest. And then, as the slides are catching up here, page 15. So what is the owner asking for? The issue at hand is building measurement, taken from 10 feet in front of the proposed building off natural grade. So the natural grade is it's at 15% slope, which means the first floor is approximately 6 feet above the measurement point, and the rear of the first floor is completely below grade. And page 16. So grade is actually 35 feet taller at the rear of the site than it is at the front. That's how steep we're talking, which is essentially the height of the building. Noted earlier was the appearance of 3 stories at the front and 2 stories at the back. And then on page 17, we just wanted to look at what would this building look like if it was measured off of a flat lot. Well, if it was, it would be about 38 feet tall and still 3 stories. So we'd still have that request, and we'd be requesting 3 feet as opposed to, or 38 feet as opposed to the 44, just for reference. And then page 18. We also want you to consider what is a 2.5 story in regards to modern architecture with flat roofs. So flat roofs are technically not allowed to be considered half stories due to zoning code language. This diagram, though, is illustrating that nearly half the first floor is below grade, while only 2 stories are completely above grade. So one could argue perhaps that the first floor is a half story. Then if you look at page 19, when that pops up here, if a flat roof were to be considered a half story, what would that look like? Well, this diagram is showing that we're pulling back the 3rd floor, so it's about 61% of the floor below. And so here what we're suggesting is we're intentionally pulling back the 3rd floor, stepping it back to maintain that feel of a half story that you'd find in a typical peaked roof. And lastly, then page 20, this diagram shows what the proposed building would look like in relation to the existing home. So here you can see the outline in thick black of the proposed roof is 4 feet 3.5 inches shorter than the existing home. So thank you for listening to our diagrams. I'll turn this over to Carol Lansing, who will briefly touch on the 2040 comprehensive plan.
Star 6 unmutes. I cannot hear you, Carol, if you're speaking. We can still not hear you. Star 6 unmutes. Also check the mute on your own device. Do not hear you, Carol. We know that Carol is online. I know that Carol was online earlier and appeared on the list of folks who are here. Can we confirm that she's on the line? Carol Lansing is on the line. Star 6, Carol unmutes. I'm sure you've tried that. I don't have anything else I can say.
President Rockwell, I received an email from Carol Lansing. She said she is pressing star 6 and it is not unmuting her.
Can we unmute her phone number from our end? Carol, apparently you may be hitting star 6 too fast. Alternately, what we had happen in the last call was that somebody, I from the applicant team called in another member of the applicant team, merged calls or something, and because they knew they were able to.
Yeah. This is Craig Martin with Pearson Keller. I can try to call her in real quick if that helps here.
Yeah, if you're able to do that. Thanks.
Okay, we should have Carol on the line now.
Hey, can you hear me?
We can.
We can hear you, Carol. Victory.
Oh, yay, yay. I wore out my star six buttons. Okay.
Yeah, that's our goal.
Thank you, commissioners. This is Carol Lansing. I'm an attorney with Beggary, Drinker, Biddle, and Wreath, and working with Sedegis and PK on this project. If you could pull up page 26 of the slide. So as you can tell, the key issue for your decision tonight is whether a proposed 3-story height of the building is consistent with the 2040 plan. As you know, no single project promotes all goals and policies in a comp plan. And in my experience, frequently a project is approved that can reasonably be argued to be inconsistent with some specific statements in a plan. But such projects have and can be approved based on consistency with other goals and policy statements and with the overall spirit and intent of the plan. So the question is whether it's reasonable to apply the Interior 2 built form guidance and other policies of the 2040 plan in the specific circumstances of this project to approve a new 3-story building. The Interior 2 guidance, and remember it is guidance, not regulation, states that building height should be 1 to 2.5 stories. It's not a maximum, but it's a should be. The interior districts do not include that language found in corridor and other districts that request to exceed the height guidance may be evaluated on the basis of whether or not a taller building is a reasonable means for achieving comprehensive plan goals. But again, it does not prohibit consideration of increased height. So my understanding is that in discussing how the built form overlay districts will implement the 2040 plan, staff is considering specifying in ordinance that the height of structures in the interior built form districts may be increased by variance. That approach, if it is adopted, is not a prohibition on height above 2.5 stories and recognizes requests for greater height may be appropriate. And like a CUP, a variance must also be evaluated on the basis of consistency with the comp plan. But under the current zoning ordinance, the mechanism for requesting an increase in height of multiple family structures is still by a conditional use permit, and so that's why we're applying for a CUP. We believe the proposed 3-story project is consistent with several policies of the 2040 plan, and that is what's displayed on your slide. So first, the Interior 2 guidance specifically allows multiple family dwellings with more than 3 units on larger lots. And as we've discussed in our submission, peak roof design, something that is compatible with a 2.5-story height guidance, is not a typical, efficient, or practical design for new construction of even a low-density 5-unit multiple family dwelling like this. As noted in the staff report, the project is consistent with 2040 plan policies supporting increased access to housing. In particular, the proposed building adds housing density near downtown, near high-frequency transit, and in a neighborhood that already has a mix of dwelling types, sizes, and architectural styles. As Craig showed you, the height, massing, and design of the proposed building fit beautifully within its context. There are other 2040 plan policies I'd also like to highlight that show the project's consistency with the plan. The project also promotes policy 5 related to visual quality of new development. And in fact, we believe that restricting the height to either a 2.5-story peaked roof form or limiting a flat roofed form to 2 stories in this particular context of large residential buildings would conflict with action steps of this policy that allow and encourage a variety of architectural styles and encourage creative transitions between varying intensities of building types and land uses. We think the proposed design provides a creative and exceptionally high quality, transition and blending in style of the older and newer large residential structures on the block, the newer apartment building and condominiums to the north, and the Walker Arts Center. And as Craig has highlighted for you, the proposed design incorporates the energy efficiency and sustainability steps encouraged by Policy 68. In addition to efficiencies achievable through new construction, the flat roof design and stepped back third floor facilitates the incorporation of the green roof components. I'll end by pointing out that there are several circumstances specific to this site that will not apply generally throughout the Interior 2 district, so you should not view approval of this 3-story project as dictating approval of any or all future requests. These circumstances include the large lot size that is conducive to greater density, the fact that the existing structure is not conducive to renovation to add that density, the extreme slope of the site and 45-foot front yard requirement constrain the design options for increased density. For example, cluster design was evaluated, but it's not feasible in this topography and due to the shape of the lot. And the proposed 3-story building will replace an existing 3-story building. A 2-story flat roof building would actually be incompatible with the height and scale of neighboring buildings, which are primarily 3-story buildings. So I think those circumstances distinguish this site. Staff agrees that the project at 3 stories meets all the criteria for a CUP other than consistency with the 2.5-story guidance. We believe there's more flexibility in how that guidance can be applied, and we hope we've shown you that the proposed 3-story building is consistent with many policies and action steps of the 2040 plan and with the spirit and intent of both the Interior 2 district and the plan as a whole. So thank you for your attention, and please let us know if you have any questions.
Very good. Thank you very much. Commissioners, are there any questions for the applicant? I believe that is the last of the applicant team. Is this correct?
Yes, it is.
All right. Very good. Commissioner Meyer.
So someone said that there could be up to 9 units on this property. Can someone just explain that to me? So, like, would it just take up a larger proportion of the footprint in order to get that?
Yeah, this is Craig Martin with Pearson Keller. So the 9-unit comment is based on, if you were to look at this as a cluster development on the site, just taking the site area and dividing it by the allowable amount.
Okay, that's interesting. So it could have up to 9 units, but the issue is that with the current one as it is, it needs a height. That was my question. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Commissioners, are there other questions for the applicant? Otherwise, we will continue into the public hearing with others on the list here. All right, seeing no other questions for the applicant at this time, is there Christine Anderson on the line? There is, please press *6 to unmute yourself and state your name and address for the record.
Commissioner Christina Anderson is with Pearson Keller. You can continue.
Very good. Thank you very much. Is there a Colleen Clark on the line? If so, please press *6, unmute yourself, and state your name and address for the record.
Hi, this is Colleen Clark. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Wonderful. Hi, I'm Colleen Clark. I am the owner of 57 Groveland Terrace, 2 doors down from the property in question. I appreciate you taking my call. My concerns are twofold. One, for the future of this historic neighborhood, as well as personally as a neighbor. I really appreciate the extensive thought and time that the city of Minneapolis has spent on the 2040 plan, designating this historic Lowry Hill area as Interior 2. And the proposals to increase the height and increase the units go against that 2040 plan. It's not consistent with the 2040 plan, otherwise there wouldn't be an ask for a variance. I would just really ask that the planning committee consider what is the benefit of making this allowance. I'm concerned about changing courses on the zoning, the height, the number of units, when clearly so much time has already been put into planning for this area. Personally, I'm concerned about the proposed plans. I received a lot of information from Lindsay, thank you very much, showing that the second and the third levels of this proposed unit come out much farther towards the street than the existing structure. The existing structure, only the first level comes out much farther. And this new structure blocks my view from my home, specifically of the beautiful Hennepin Avenue United Methodist Church. I think it's been presented that the home will only be as high as the, or not, excuse me, not quite as high as the current structure, but that's just the very back part. The new structure comes out really far. Surely a home's property value, and especially this area, has ties to its views, as the owners had studies done of various neighbors around them of their views, but mine was not included in that study. The second story of the proposed building also allows for rooftop living space, increasing the height visually as well for surrounding neighbors. In all of the presentations, my home was not shown on any of those diagrams. The selected comparisons for the new units seem to be rather cherry-picked. The apartments, the handful of two-family condos, the modern aspects of the Walker, rather than the overwhelming majority of the historic single-family homes that are the true makeup of this neighborhood. I reached out to Lindsay as well as the main architect back in May, and they were really very helpful in giving me some information to try to understand this project. I was supposed to be put in contact with the owner, but she did not get back in contact with me. I did submit photos of the view from my home showing how the new building would obstruct that view. I'm asking that the committee continue with their recommendation to deny the height and unit allowance. This seems to be more of a personal investment property rather than what's in the best interest of the neighborhood. The current safety issues with the driveway and where the kitchen is located, those could be addressed in another way. That's a personal issue in my opinion, and not really an issue that serves the neighborhood and the city by allowing these variances. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have Ryan Sadecki, if you wish to testify. I'm not sure if you're a member of the ownership team. *6 unmutes. I know that Commissioner, hello?
Hi, Commissioner. Ryan is part of the applicant team. This is Craig Martin.
Okay, very good. Are there any other folks on the line wishing to testify? If there are, please press *6 to unmute yourself and state your name and address. Otherwise, I will close the public hearing. Hearing no one, I will close the public hearing. With that, Commissioners, we have 3 applications. Commissioner Caprini has a comment. If you're able to unmute Commissioner Caprini, *6. Commissioner Caprini, I'm not sure if you're on the phone or on.
I'm here.
Oh, there you are. Yes, go ahead. You have a comment.
I'm here. Thank you. Actually, I just wanted to say that I feel kind of awkward. This is kind of like a yellow light phase for me in terms of looking at this particular project and the last one that was voted on. And unfortunately, I had some technical difficulties with being able to be counted. which I would have voted yes for. But I'm just in a space where I recognize clearly, even though I knew this in the past, but more clearly tonight in listening to the discussion, that I'm kind of in a situation where my opinion doesn't really matter. It's more about what is being presented by the applicants and what policies that they have to adhere to, or zoning laws. So that's unfortunate. And it's my concern that we may end up in a position where quite a few of these newer developments that are going to be coming forward throughout the city will be able to kind of sneak around or under some of the guidelines of the 2040 in terms of affordable housing. And our city is in a really precarious space when it comes to diversifying our neighborhoods. And I put my school board hat on at this point in thinking in terms of how desperately we are, you know, in need of diversifying our schools. So I guess I just wanted to make that comment and let folks know that I do understand what our responsibility is as a commissioner being on the planning commission. But I just wanted to share that it's unfortunate that I feel like this is a yellow light phase that we're in, and it's just it's concerning to me. But I do understand what is required of myself as a commissioner. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Sweezy.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to talk a little bit about this project in particular, and how I understand what our role is with respect to each project that comes before us. That, you know, it's important that we treat them separately because they do stand on their own. That's our responsibility, and that there are different laws and requirements of the 2040 plan that apply to these different projects, and it's that way for a reason. Because of the size and the location. And we keep in mind also that the 2040 plan was a parcel by parcel examination of the properties in the city of Minneapolis with respect to future development. And what I find particularly concerning about this project, and I will, by the way, be supporting all three of the staff recommendations, particularly the denial of the conditional use permit and the site plan review. What I find particularly concerning about this project is what's being offered as the justification for bringing it forward is that the built form project that is on the property at the moment no longer works for the owner. And I think, you know, it's very, very clear that the purpose of zoning laws and the comprehensive plan, which is to look forward for 20 years, is that it speaks to the use and the built form and the character of the property, no matter who owns it. It's meant to apply to the property specifically, again, without respect to the owner. So you don't just say after 20 years or so, the house doesn't work for me anymore, now I want to put up an apartment building, without respect to the zoning and what's required here. And Interior 2 is very specific about what is contemplated and what is allowed. And it's very obvious to me that this is not what's contemplated by it. And it's also not in the best interest, I think, in this location for this neighborhood. Again, the 2040 plan was a property by property, you know, specific laying out, looking at the neighborhoods, looking at what was already had the most density, with a view toward actually putting more density in areas that had been overlooked, perhaps, and things like that. So on balance, I think that this is a project that clearly doesn't meet the goals of the 2040 plan, let alone the law, and I can't support it for these reasons. And I think I would encourage other commissioners to do the same, and be very wary of supporting things based on the spirit, because I don't think this reflects the spirit of the 2040 comp plan at all. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Sweezy. Other commissioners' comments? Discussion? Motions? Commissioner, several popped up. Commissioner Olson.
I'm just wondering if someone can walk me through one more time how we measure the height of a building when it's on a sloped site.
Yeah, when we measure height of a building, we measure it 10 feet out from the front face of the building towards the street. So in this case, there is a slope, so that point is about 10 feet below kind of where the first floor sits.
Okay, thank you.
Very good. Commissioner Marwa.
Yes, hi. My question was about just is this building historic, but is this home historic? I just, kind of looking at it, it looks like it may be. If so, is there any kind of regulation about tear down as the results for this one property or when it was built?
I'll ask staff to address that. I believe this has gone to HPC. Is that correct, Lindsay?
Yes, the project went to the HPC as a demolition of a potential historic resource, and the application was approved by the HPC to demolish the home.
Very good. Commissioner Meyer, did you have an additional comment or no?
Mine was the same that Commissioner Olson brought up, but like how you treat the slope. And I guess the question is, expanding on the question would be, does the slope present a practical difficulty in this case that would be something that you would consider? I would like, appreciate it if staff could say more for why they recommended denial in this case.
So you mentioned a practical difficulty, and that is the first finding for a variance application. With a conditional use permit application, the main finding that we are hinging our recommendation on is consistency with the comprehensive plan. So this is a unique situation where it's possible that we may have been able to make the finding if it had been a variance, but because of the application type, it is, and the size of the building, it is a conditional use permit. And so our recommendation hinges on consistency with the comprehensive plan. And the comprehensive plan is pretty clear about interior 2 calling for a maximum of 2.5 stories with no stated mechanism for increasing the height beyond that.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioners, are there further questions, comments, discussion, motions? Commissioner Marwa.
Thanks. Sorry, and just to understand for a clarification, and so why is staff recommending an approval of R3 multiple family district for this site? Just for clarification, Lindsay.
So staff is recommending approval of the rezoning application because that is consistent with the comprehensive plan. It may be the case that there might be a different proposal here that would include, 3, 4, or 5 units that would be consistent with the comprehensive plan. When we have rezoning applications, these are applications that tend to take longer. They have to go before the city council. So staff is supportive of the rezoning application here, which basically opens a door to potentially explore other configurations of multiple family dwellings on the site, but that don't exceed the height.
Mr. Marwa, I think an additional piece there is that, remember the zoning code and the comprehensive plan work in tandem. They're not separate, right? They work in tandem, and so there are sort of checks and balances in both directions. Commissioner Smiley.
Thank you. I just wanted to follow up to Commissioner Marwa's question, which also gets at my the beginning comment that I made. So if we do approve the rezoning and deny the conditional use permit and the site plan review as recommended by staff, it is possible that the returning application could be something that will again ask for rezoning, right? Like bring it back to what it was. Is that a possibility, or do you think that the chances of that happening are actually very low?
So when we think about the comprehensive plan, which was adopted in January, there are guidelines for heights and densities in these districts all across the city, but we haven't, as you know, adopted the built form district overlays yet. So we did identify that R3 is consistent with Interior 2, and the R3 does allow single family, 2-family structures as well. So I can't anticipate that someone would want to rezone to a more restrictive district when there's nothing that you can do in R2 that you can't do in R3. It just does open up that possibility for constructing more than 2 dwelling units on the site.
Thank you. That answered my question.
Commissioners, any further questions, discussion? Motions? There's 3 applications before us. The rezoning, Commissioner Sweezy.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll move item A, the rezoning.
Commissioner Smiley.
Second that motion.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Caprini?
Aye.
Smiley?
Aye.
Aye.
Marwa?
Aye.
Meyer?
Aye.
Olson?
Aye.
Schrader?
Aye.
Sweezy?
Aye.
That's 7-0.
That motion carries. Commissioners, we have Commissioner Sweezy.
I'll move staff recommendation for item letter B, which is to deny the conditional use permit.
Motion to deny the conditional use permit. Commissioners, do we have a second? Commissioner Smiley.
I second that motion.
We have a motion and a second to deny the conditional use permit, item B, consistent with staff recommendation. Any further discussion? Clerk, please call the roll.
Caprini?
Aye.
Smiley?
Aye.
Marwa?
Aye.
Meyer?
Aye.
Olson?
Aye.
Schrader?
Aye.
Sweezy?
Aye.
That's 7-0.
That motion carries. Commissioner Sweezy.
Mr. President, I'll move staff recommendation for letter C, the site plan review, to deny the site plan review.
Do we have a second? Commissioner Marwa.
Caprini, second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Caprini?
Aye.
Smiley?
Aye.
Marwa?
Aye.
Meyer,
Aye.
Olson,
Aye.
Schrader,
Aye.
Sweezy,
Aye.
7-0.
That motion carries, and that concludes our business with item number 17, and concludes all of our discussion items. Kimberly or any other staff, are there staff updates?
One brief update on the 2 Lake Street projects that I had mentioned went to the Biz Committee of the City Council on appeal. Off the top of my head now, I can't remember those addresses, but between 502 and 510 West Lake Street, they were 2 projects across the street from one another. The appeals on those were related to the requirement that the amount of ground floor commercial space be increased to 50%. That appeal was granted, and so that condition of approval was effectively removed from the variance application, and those projects will proceed. Beyond that, we do not have any updates at this time.
Very good. Thank you very much. Thanks all. Thanks again to all of our staff and technical folks who make these meetings happen. With that, meeting is adjourned.